wait, just.
No, it's 7 o'clock. My
Is it?
ticketed time, it says a minute
Okay,
past
I'm looking
7.
up there. Okay, no, that's fine. If it's 7 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock. Okay, good evening.
Have you got it done?
Yeah.
Okay. One on the apologies.
Yes, Madam Chairman, apologies from Councillor Simon Rubner, who's COVID this evening. Councillor Strack is substituted.
Thank you. Declarations of interest to receive.
I'm sorry. The Simon Woodner, sorry.
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry, I didn't do that.
I'll let you finish saying what you're saying, and I've got a declaration of interest potentially. So
Shall I just read this out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Receive declarations of interest from councillors on items on the agenda. B, receive written requests for dispensations for declarable interest. And C, grant any request for dispensation as appropriate.
It's only a personal interest. I would say it's a presidential interest that my son attends Woodlands Primary School. I see they've got an application in for DFID. So I just think I take myself by saying it's personal because he attends that school. That's it.
Thank you, Jason. Okay. Public participation? None? Can I read this out? So it's
No.
on, it's okay.
I'm sure you know.
Okay. Okay. 4 minutes to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November.
There was just one slight amendment, Madam Chairman, that I've already made as typo really, is that it referred to the ACV application we put in as being St Michael's Church. It was, of course, St Andrew's Church, so I'll change that in a minute. Thank you, Councillor Hutchins, for picking that up.
Yes. So I can sign them?
Absolutely.
There we are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, community grant applications to consider approval recommendations to council on the 23rd of March 2022 on the following applications.
Unless they can be determined here this evening,
yes.
Madam Chair. In addition to the two that you have before you, just to note as well, importantly, that this will be the last tranche of applications considered this financial year, and in the budget remaining for this year, £6,500. In addition, it's entirely up to you whether you deem it's appropriate to consider it this evening, but there was an application which was submitted during the course of the last week when the agenda papers had already gone out by Bournemouth Brass. I have emailed that and I've got hard copies here. We pass those around. You don't have to consider, it's at your discretion, members, whether you want to consider it this evening or not. But you should have three before you, potentially. The Hearts Inclusive Theatre, £500 for disabled user workshops. The Woodlands Primary School, £1,000 for a defibrillator, and Bournemouth Brass, who are seeking £880 for, it seems to be sort of running costs really, as far as I could make out from the literature that they've supplied.
Yes. Okay, Hearts. Does anybody want to say anything about the Hearts Inclusive Theatre? I do, because it's got 68,000. I mean, I'm fine with it. I used to be one of the people that used to be on one of the trustees, but they have got 68,000. I wonder what they're going to. Is it? I can't. That's why I said I looked through it. What are they going to spend this what do they need this 500,000 for?
No, but if you look at that, the workshops, £500 wouldn't be workshops for 5 to 11-year-olds, workshops 12 to 18-year-olds, children's theatre, youth theatre, and they've got the Arc at Hartswood, 96 Shenley Road, Sky Studios, Elstree Studios, and Elstree UTC. Personally, I think they do a really good job.
They do. They've always
got £8,000 in the bank.
Yeah, but this is for activities in Boreham Wood specifically that I
Just
think
Boreham
they're
Wood.
not funded for elsewhere.
For about 16 residents of Boreham Wood out of 36 for these particular workshops. My question is that
fine. I mean, I'm happy to.
benefit?
I'm happy with it, but
for
I
Boreham
just
Wood?
wanted to ask you.
Don't suggest they're not doing a good job.
Oh, no, they
Is
do.
16 residents enough to
It's what, about 30,000
Well, I'm happy to give it to them. I just was bringing it up just to see how you felt.
Well, also, they haven't got a venue yet.
No.
They haven't got a venue in Borehamwood.
No, it's in Bushy, the venue.
No, they're asking for a venue but they haven't sorted it. They've got about 5 places that they're trying to get a venue, but they don't have one. It's just.
No, but they will. They'll find somewhere.
Oh, well, it's up to you.
So I'll take that one as approved. What's the Woodlands Primary School? Have you finished discussing that one?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
fine. We offered one when Graham was here, and he didn't want one.
Well, Graham was the chairman at the time, and I think,
Yes,
they've got new governing body chair, they've got a new head. I think we have a
I'm
duty.
happy with it. I'm
Yeah,
not
the
saying I'm not
deputy
wanting.
No, absolutely. I think we have a duty
We
to
wanted to give it last
We
time.
were
finish the
there,
school.
we did.
The only thing I would recommend to the council, however, is the update on the map. I did see a map the other day. I appreciate all the work that Clyde put in on that. I did see a map the other day, and obviously that would need updating. I appreciate what Cass also said as well. The defibrillator is still missing at Abbey Park. It's not there. So, we've got things like that.
I've asked Ian Kershaw is supposed to be replacing it. Could you chase it with him, please?
I'm happy to do that. But the only thing I'm concerned about, we got this map and it's got our logo on it, and it always worries me that
It's not up to date.
and how it comes across on this authority, how
That
it
is
could,
only the only one.
because my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Hugh, but my understanding was once we've handed over the unit, it's down to them, their responsibility to maintain it and everything like that.
We were very clear about that at the
But
time.
my concern is having our logo on a map that then almost indicates that we're then set to that. So I've got some questions around that, you know what I mean? Just to tidy it up a bit.
Can I say that I've received comments about the user friendliness of the map? It is quite difficult to determine exactly where the defibrillators are. If you needed one, just from looking at that map. I wonder whether in the current age of when people have got QR codes and so on, and Google Maps on their phones, there might be another way we could investigate the map of the defibrillators and make it.
There should be an interactive map
Yeah,
on the
that's
website. If someone needs a defibrillator in a hurry, they're not going to have a copy of the town crier with them.
I
They're
mean,
going to have their mobile phone.
Even if
So-
they did, they'd struggle to find one
Yeah.
using that map.
But with sort of Google Maps, you can literally pin them on, and then people can just do a search,
And then
they'll
click how to get to
and
this
they'll get
one.
directions. Yeah.
I would suggest we employ a professional map person, as it were,
Yeah.
to create a suitable map which can be used online. And
It's a very simple
job.
So, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to write to Ian Kershaw regarding.
Yeah, I
I'm
have
happy to
already-
do. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll copy you
He's on
in.
holiday till mid next week, but
That's
I have
fine.
to him
Well,
twice.
I'll email him.
And
copy you in.
Steve Burton before that,
Okay.
because it should be claimed on their insurance.
So what about the grants?
Yeah, happy to support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Is the Woodlands one subject to not receiving monies from elsewhere?
Sorry?
Is the Woodlands grant conditional on?
Oh,
not
yes,
receiving
because
other
Jeremy
monies?
opted to put 350 of his, whiz money in if, Richard and Michelle would match fund it, and that would have paid for it. What's the status now?
Well, I'm still happy to do that, but it would have to wait until next year's week's
Oh, I
budget
know.
kicks in, so I
Listen,
think.
And we've got money in the
Yeah,
budget.
because-
That's
Yeah,
all.
let's not make them wait.
No, we'll
Yeah.
do it. We wanted to do
And we've
it.
done all of them there as well, yeah.
Okay.
And what about the brass band? Do you want to leave that till next financial year, or do you want to?
We
Yeah,
have
yeah.
look at it,
Yeah.
haven't we?
Yeah. Let's look at it
Chairman,
now.
just Chairman,
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it when it came in earlier. The only comment I have is that basically the justification for this grant seems to be the fact that their rehearsal venue at the Holy Cross has increased its hall hire fees by 83%. So I sort of found it ironic that we run a community hall and we're being asked to give a community organisation £880 in order that they can use that money to hire a different community hall.
We
Surely,
can't.
And they can't use this hall.
They can't use this hall.
Because they store
They
their
store them.
certificates
We haven't got
there. We don't have
storage.
to store it.
That's the reason. That is the reason, definitely.
Mm. Yeah, I was a bit concerned, but they didn't seem to be specifying exactly what they've all spent it on, because my understanding is that.
Oh,
we've
because
got-
the first page was missing on the application.
Um,
Now the first page is static and hadn't copied it through.
Well, you've got all the papers.
You've got it now.
We have now,
You've got it now. I would like this, I would definitely go to this.
And I would too.
I've got no problem supporting the van, so.
Okay.
if everyone else
How
is
do
okay.
you feel? Both of you?
I've got no problems in supporting the application on this occasion, but I would echo what Jeremy said, which is, you know,
Shame they can't use.
exactly, and, you know, we don't know the life expectancy of Holy Cross Hall anyway, so, you know, they might actually be looking for somewhere else in the future anyway, so.
So with the letter that I sent, I'd perhaps encourage Andrew Grady, Mr. Grady, to consider Fairway Hall as an option for using.
But Andrew Manley.
If it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that obviously it's been an exceptional period, but I don't think we should be effectively facilitating or sustaining a situation where any community hall right increases its rent by 83%.
Yeah, it's a big increase.
Yeah,
Massive.
It's a
I mean,
big
you know,
increase.
it's the bit that they should understand that this is a one-off. and-
Yeah, absolutely, that's where I'm coming
from. Well,
Where
well,
they
Peter.
store their
It's
instruments.
not a
That
service
is
level
their
agreement.
their instruments and their, what do you call
Yeah.
it? When you put the music stands there.
I agree with Jeremy though, I mean, it's a one-off, it has to be made clear, but maybe consider other forms, because 83%, that is ridiculous.
I mean, in the future, when we've got more space and storage available, I think we'd want them here.
I would, of
Right?
course.
Oh, absolutely, they'd be
Absolutely.
delighted if they could.
We'd have a bit of that music playing or full council, at
No,
times in
seriously,
town.
we would want them here. I always say that when I hear them booking somebody else's hall. I say, right, we've got Fairway Hall.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should have a dedicated rehearsal room on the third floor.
Third floor, on the
Second
roof,
floor.
on the roof. Yeah.
On the top floor.
Okay, so that's, so it's number 6, so you've got that with you, yes?
That's great, thank you, Madam Chairman. So
Financial report?
you've got the income and expenditure report before you, members. We're coming to the end of the financial year, as you know. It's printed out on a by committee basis. So, if there's any, I haven't been notified of any questions in advance.
None for me.
So if you're happy to go on to the next item, I have emailed it around, but I've also printed off hard copies, which are the findings of the independent remuneration panel. And so I'll pass 2 down that way. And 3 there.
Thank you.
And 2, one more down there.
Oh, you've got that, that's it, sorry, we've done.
So,
If you'd like me to talk to the report, you can see that the panel met yesterday and established it knew what its remits and methodology was going to be. I've been in communication with the panel prior to the meeting. What we did was drill down into the comparable and neighbouring council arrangements. And you can see that those are all recorded there, which ones were consulted in my straw poll. And the conclusions reached were on the basis of exactly what the roles of councillors were, not just according to the Good Councillors Guide, but also very specifically about the functions that you members carry out here in Elstree and Boreham Wood, and in particular, the role of the mayor and the deputy mayor was included in the recommendations, especially, which had previously been perhaps overlooked insofar as the deputy mayor undertakes or will incur more expenses than a backbench member. The needs for IT equipment and stationery, and of course the inflation and the fact that the simple fact that things are more expensive nowadays. So the basis for the increase was against 11 years worth of consumer price inflation according to the Bank of England's calculator, which was established at 36%, which was rounded, so that the proposal is now that the mayor will receive an annual allowance at the start of the year, rather than having to account for it on a case-by-case basis, which seems overly bureaucratic and administrative burden for the council to undertake. At the start of the year of £1,300, the deputy mayor £650, which represents half of the mayor's amount, and the basic member allowance will go up from £300 to £400, based on inflation, a £100 increase. But in addition to that, it was recognised that there would be cases where members might incur exceptional costs over and above that. Say, for example, you wanted to go for a very important conference, I don't know, in Edinburgh, or if there were reasons to go to the Twin Towns on council business. In those cases, it was felt that by application to this committee, members could apply for additional funds to be released to cover their expenses. And I've listed some possible examples here: travel to Twin Towns, to conferences and training, I think we did for one councillor who was unable to get a computer some years ago, pay for a computer for him. And then when it came to his time of office to end, actually, quite reasonably offered to hand it back to the council that was deemed to be so old of no, real inherent value. So then you might as well keep it as a party gift itself. No, there's nothing you can do with this. You can't usefully use it. So those sorts of expenses. The cost to the council of these increases would therefore be an increase of £1,800 per year. And it was recommended, yes, that to save on unnecessary bureaucracy and administration, that these awards allowances be paid at the start of each municipal year. Those are the conclusions of the independent remuneration panel.
Can I keep on?
Yeah.
First thing, I think it talks about visits and engagements with outside bodies. And we're going to be considering the role of outside bodies and how we manage that process in a moment. So I was wondering whether, if that changes, would that change the recommendation? And secondly, it occurs to me the items of IT equipment should officially be a loan to a member if any items are bought for them. But obviously, in the situation where they're too old to have any value, then they could, the council would say, no, keep it. But if the person's only a member for a year and they need a computer, they really want it back if they actually cease being a member. So I think maybe that would be something we could include.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, I'm happy to say, yeah, I mean, originally when the mayor's money was there, the mayor's always been paid something, and I wholeheartedly agree that that money is now being at that sort of stage for some time now. I think it has to increase. Our town mayor, I think, does a lot in an active year. I appreciate over the last few years we've had a pandemic and that, but let's look at what Simon did when he was mayor. He was out, he was there at the COVID centres, he was out handing out food, he was doing above and beyond the call of duty to some councillors. I think he was certainly valued for money when it came to that, and I appreciate you, probably most of that he did off his own back rather than this position of mayor, but he obviously was showing the mayoral chain in some of those occasions. So, I think that money should increase, certainly for the mayor wholeheartedly. And again, with the deputy mayor, I've always said for some time actually that the deputy mayor doesn't get enough to help pay for some of the things that they go to. You go to charity organisations as mayor, can you put some money into the raffle ticket, can you fund this, can you fund that? That money soon dwindles, and it doesn't go far. It's interesting to look at all the towns, parishes that they've looked at. Now, I appreciate, some of these are nowhere near in similar size to Elstree and Bournemouth Town
It was
Council.
very clear, Councillor Butler, that there were two categories of council being looked at, those which were neighbouring, but also those of a similar sort of size. That's why you've got the ones like Felixstowe and Hartford.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Hatfield's probably our closest one that would link to this. Alden Parish, Shenley Parish, they're nowhere near to some of the things that we do. Although I say that,
Or councillors.
yeah, exactly. Look, Alden Parish, they do a lot, and I credit their parish councillors who attend Hertsmere Borough Council planning meetings. So often do I see them go over there, speak up for their residents, and credit where credit's due. I might not politically see eye to eye with them, but I honestly congratulate their parish councillors and how they work in that respect. I think this probably, I'm happy to go with the recommendations. I don't know how you feel, but there's part of me that says the history of being a parish council, do we really need to be paid a sum for the normal members? I still have a question around that. I'll be happy to listen to other people's views, but I will support the mayoral increases and the deputy mayoral increases, but I'd happily listen to a debate as to why we, as other councillors, should receive any money at all.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Neil.
I think,
Oh, no, sorry, I was looking at you.
Okay, fine, sorry. Yeah, I think the purpose of having this looked at by an independent panel is to avoid the sort of slightly unseemly nature of councillors having to get directly involved in setting their own allowances. I wanted to record certainly my thanks to the members of the independent panel for undertaking this task, and I won't comment on the substance of it because they are an independent panel. I would say that I note that the allowances have effectively jumped by 36% because they haven't been adjusted since 2011, so that's over a decade. That's probably an unhealthy way to do it. I prefer to see things shift gradually rather than in big jumps and big hikes, because it's much harder to justify or explain big jumps and big hikes. And I would just recommend moving forward that perhaps either the panel meets on an annual basis to undertake an annual review and hear feedback from councillors as to issues they want them to address, or that perhaps the panel would meet once more next year and index link the current recommended allowances against whatever scale they want to, and then review it again in 4 years' time. I just think we should be reviewing this on a regular basis and adjusting it in small amounts to avoid this kind of build-up again.
okay, thank you. Matt, you want to speak?
Yes, I would. I again, thank you very much to Norman and Anthony for coming with you to look at this. And I do think that, these increases are justified. The basic member allowance is less than £1 a day, and £400 just takes it to over £1 a day. So telephone costs, stamps, there's all sorts of things that we get involved in, and £300 doesn't go very far. So I think that we should agree these recommendations, and particularly the fact that the deputy mayor has never been recognised, that the deputy mayor carries out lots of functions that the mayor cannot undertake for many different reasons. So I would be happy to support this.
Thank you very much, Pat. Yeah, so the consensus is that you support it now, but to be looked at each year. Is that what you're saying?
Or index linked, so it would only need to be looked at every 4 or 5 years, but it could just increase by inflation or whatever index they choose.
That's absolutely very doable, Madam Mayor. I would be surprised if there are any other authorities in Hertfordshire which have carried out as a comprehensive exercise.
Thank you very much.
As we have here.
And
And they're certainly looking at it, whilst most authorities don't seem to have much of an allowance at all, that I bet there are none who are advanced enough to have one, which was inflated each year accordingly. So I think once again the town council will be leading the way in that by being taking a sensible approach.
I said index linked, not inflated. That means it could go
Could
down
potentially
as
go
well as
down.
up,
Yeah,
just to be clear.
I'm with you.
yeah, and these two people, they're independent, and I think they've looked at it, haven't they, and realised that it's a silly, really amount, isn't it?
The only question I have for you is, obviously we didn't budget for this increase because we didn't know what it was starting on the beginning of the new financial year on the 1st of April. When do you want this to start? Next year or the following year? If it is the 1st of April, we'll need to find £1,800 from another budget to potentially or
This is not
What
financial
would you
year.
recommend overspending in the allowances?
do you think when to start it?
I think it's got to align with the financial year.
No, but I'm saying in the new financial year, we haven't inflated the.
Where do we
Use the contingency budget. No?
Okay.
That's what it's for.
Okay,
Okay,
Just,
contingency ready for me.
no, I don't think we're community. Last time I suggested, an inflation-related increase in, something, which was actually for the rent and parking spaces, which turned down. That was a few years
the
back.
what, sorry, the parking
The
space?
parking spaces rented from us, I've suggested that, an index link basically increasing from what we charged, and that was turned down.
Yeah, but the reason that was turned down was because they were already significantly under market rates. And what we've done here in this exercise is take something that hadn't been looked at for 11 years, bring it up to where it should be, and then suggesting we index link it to inflation or something similar. With the parking spaces, we were already at a low point and we hadn't gone through an exercise of increasing it to current market levels. So it's not comparing the same
I
thing.
mean, I was suggesting increasing it to current market.
Well, we can put it on, we can,
Can I say, if we're being clear,
Anyway,
if we're being clear, the members' allowances have been looked at pretty much every year by this authority, it's just that members have decided not to
It was
raise them,
about
not to
when
raise
I was-
them.
yeah, we did-
So
we-
it wasn't that they had never been looked at, it's been brushed under the table, but only lately has the decision been taken to
yeah, it's
commission an
been
independent
looked at,
remuneration
yeah,
panel.
no,
Which was done on a completely cost neutral basis to the council actually in the end, so that was very, the exercise cost was done, the exercise was done in this.
it has, that's what I was going to say, we have looked at it, but it's been turned down in the past. Okay, thank you very much. Sustainable transport, please.
Yes, and I do have a handout for this one as well, which I've also, so I'm giving them out at the time, otherwise you're going to get bamboozled by all
Okay, good.
the papers. So I've got 2 that way and 3 that way.
Thank you.
Again, you have seen these already, it's just handing these out a hard copy. So this is a referral from the Sustainable Transport Subcommittee to sort of speed along the project of installing these electrical charging points at Fairway Hall. What we have now, we commissioned a survey, which it cost £250 to undertake, so that we can get actually detailed costs of installing the points in full. And as you can see, there's been one quote obtained, which is the same company that the Borough Council have used to install theirs, and it's coming in at just under £20,000. One of the points will be in what was the dentist's car park, which is accessible to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the other would be in this car park, it's Fairway Hall car park, which would be behind the barrier, not accessible to the public in that time, but usable by Town Council in its new electric van, God willing. And you will see also that we are eligible for this AUX funding, government funding, and they will cover about 75% of the costs. So it's up to you members how to proceed with this. If you do go ahead, if you do give the green lights for this project to go ahead sooner rather than later, then we can get on with this. I will seek to obtain 2 other quotes for audit purposes as well, best value purposes, of course. And what I suggest you do, if you do want to give the green light, is fund the remainder of that part which we're not eligible for AUX through the capital projects earmarked reserve, which is currently a very healthy standard. I do have the papers in front of me for that. Here we go. So the capital projects is currently £126,000 220. So as you can see, it's more than enough in that earmarked reserve to fund any remainder.
Yep, I'm happy with
I
that.
think I'm happy with it because we've got to have it.
Yeah.
What's the point in putting it on hold if we've got to have it?
And
Yeah.
this will be generating an income as well, and actually having recently reviewed the income that the borough has obtained from their electric parking points over the past few years. It's a very healthy income indeed when it's looked at against the cost. So I think that over a period of a few years, we'll recoup whatever we end up paying out.
We're talking,
Yeah, it's a good income stream to have.
Great.
Jeremy, do you know what they charge per kilowatt hour?
It's on the paperwork. It's not as straightforward as that because there are various subscription schemes the vehicle users can be part of that gets them a discount. It's yeah, and then there's a transaction fee. It's broadly sort of between 1 and 3 pence, isn't it?
Yeah.
so rather than bring this back again, are you happy with just a press on and make this happen?
Yeah, why
Yeah.
don't you-
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was talking about what we charge the public to charge them on our,
This is cost of year.
Sorry?
The cost of year.
that's not what we charge.
No, I believe we
No,
can set
no,
that.
but we can.
Yeah, we can set it, what I'm saying is we need to set it as a comparable rate probably to the borough council. So I was asking what the borough council charge the public for charging on that.
I mean, it should be a comparable rate, but these are actually more advanced and faster charging systems than most of the borough ones. So, and we should probably peg it against what else is available commercially in the area. Because the borough charging points are relatively old and slow.
Yeah, I mean, I found this article in the paper which is cost per kilowatt hour of public charges in different areas of the country. West Midlands it was 20 pence, and in the South West it was 63 pence. So there's quite a range available that you could charge. So we need to look into that in more detail and decide
But the charge?
what we charge. We obviously don't want to lose money on
No, of course.
the people using our electricity, and we don't want to subsidise. So we don't want to subsidise the public when they come and use the charger. So we need to
What we'll
look at
do,
it
we'll
rather more
look at the
closely to
comparison.
decide.
We need to start making our assets pay for themselves.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Clive. Policies and procedures?
Thank you, Madam Chair, that's good. So we have, I'm just checking, yes, that's it, that covers the financial. So the first one is the investment policy, which we're asked to look at yearly. Seems possibly excessive, but there you are. There are no changes with this. Unfortunately, the deputy clerk is unable to attend this meeting in person, but she would have something to say about the work we've undertaken with the borough to try and become involved with their investment schemes and piggyback on those to see what could happen. She's got some updates on
Has
that.
that progressed for you?
No, she's had difficulty with the borough on it, and unfortunately, yeah. Despite emails, I mean, it's progressed insofar as we've been pushing for it, but the problem is perhaps I'll talk outside of this meeting to see.
Okay, I'd be happy to do what I can to help.
To help,
expedite it.
I have seen Tracy's copied these, the emails and correspondence that she's had, and, I can say she's been pushing at that. But the investment policy is pretty straightforward. There's to be nothing contentious with that to agree.
A couple of typos off last.
Thank you, I can see one here.
Yeah, there's one,
I
yeah.
can see one that's starting out. And then the social media policy, perhaps, there'll be parts of this which, there's some elements of social media which I think we're going to be bringing up in the staffing, in the excluded section of the meeting. This social media policy, if I remember correctly, we were going to look at, was it last year or the year before, we decided to defer it depending on, because there had been some advances with regard to the members' code of conduct.
Yeah.
And so we thought we'd leave it till after that came out formally before we decided whether it would have an implication. It's probably quite old, but I don't know whether there's anything in it that's contentious, but so.
Jeremy?
I looked at this carefully. It's not so much really it's contentious. It's just that it's dated and it's archaic. I mean, the social networks aren't applications anymore. They're entire platforms in their own right and mechanisms for communication and media outlets in their own right. And this doesn't even recognise things like Snapchat, Instagram, and so on and so forth. And the entire direction in which this policy leans is to that I try and avoid engagement where possible. I mean, we're living in a different world now. Look, I don't think I don't think we can revise, update, and develop a new social media policy in a meeting this evening. But I do think that rather than just renewing what we already have, because it's the easy thing to do, we ought to agree to do a piece of work on this before it's renewed, really overhaul it, take advice, examples of best practice, and link it to our general public relations approach. If we accept that we do need to engage more with social media, then our policy will come from a very different place.
Well, through you, Madam Chairman, if I may, the council also has a communications policy, and that very much indicates the steer for the council and how it should engage with the public and so on. And the focus of that is far from avoiding communication. It's quite the opposite. It is to engage as much as possible. And as an authority, I think in practice, we work quite well in doing that. We're a very open authority. We have meetings with members of the public in this very room and reception and so on. Yes, I perhaps misused my words when I said it was it might potentially be contentious, but I did say it's quite old now. It does feels out of touch. Perhaps, but then Councillor Newmark mentioned about good practice. Perhaps it might be worth finding a authority that has undertaken this exercise recently with perhaps more up-to-date policy altogether, and having a look at one of theirs and seeing whether we could plagiarise that for our purposes rather than adopting this one. So it's actually just to simply disband this one altogether at the present time, as things have moved on. Again, perhaps some of this may be for the second part of the meeting, but I do think we need to have a discussion about social media vis-a-vis the town council and what sort of permissions there are for who can do what
And what we should be doing.
what we should be doing, what
Yes,
staff
I
what we
agree.
be doing, and
I
what people should be permitted to be able to respond to things and so on. Or how much time and energy should be spent. There are some authorities who have a dedicated officer who only looks at social media and that. So
could this potentially come under one of the new officers?
exactly.
So
Exactly.
So we can leave this, we can.
well, we're
Defer it.
going to defer it, and obviously we're going to be touching on it again
Yeah,
later on,
yeah.
aren't we? So it'll be interesting to
And
see.
somebody else should be, I agree.
Scrutinise it basically.
So I'm over to you, Madam Chairman, for the next item, which is the outside bodies, which was a referral from the meeting on the 24th of November.
Right, yeah, we I think Clive, you had an idea of to table the,
Well, I was wondering if there's a better way of doing
you
it.
can take that mask off, or you don't want to.
If you don't want to, leave it.
Thinking of everyone else.
Hear you now.
In case they
No,
go
it's
down,
like in
COVID
another
very
chamber,
soon.
like it's,
I don't want to pass it on.
no,
I don't
why,
have to.
we got COVID.
Yeah, no, I mean.
Yeah, no. Have you got COVID? Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Have you got COVID?
I tested negative this morning.
Okay, good. That's what I did as well. So I tested that morning. That's
that's
fine.
fine.
No, I mean, I think there are two main things. First of all, it doesn't seem to work that well with people reading out their reports or giving a report
Right.
in the meeting, and they haven't been to meetings, whatever. Secondly, I'm not convinced that we're covering all the organisations we ought to be covering. Well, I'm wondering if there is a better way, whether we could somehow solicit contributions from the organisations themselves, or we can have discussions with them to decide whether they actually want someone to come to their meetings or not, and if not, whether they would be happy to send in a report.
Thank you, Pat.
Well, it's usual with other meetings that I attend, that you do table things in advance, and that does speed up the meeting. If people were reporting from an outside body, that they would put their report in first, so that members have got an opportunity to read through it, and then they can
I
ask
like that
questions if
idea.
they wanted to.
Yeah, look, I'm happy what Pat's, thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with what Pat's just said, and Clive actually. I think, you know what, I think if we're going to do a change and progress this council and turn it turn it into actually bringing the public into us as well, I think it'd be a nice idea. Yes, table reports, but also, like Clive said, actually try and encourage some people to come and also be a bit more interactive under this heading. We have public participation. Those 15 minutes don't last long when we do have public participation. Actually, wouldn't it be nice to hear from one of these outside bodies, someone else come in?
Yeah,
Exactly. Come in and say, actually, this is who we are as well, and put a face to the name rather than just having that. And also look at other people out there and say, actually, should we just have 1 or 2 reports at that heading? And give it a decent bit of time to actually hear from these organisations.
Like the borough.
Yeah, and have that interaction a bit more. And then anyone else wants to table their reports, they can table them. If there's a question or a query or a worry, they can say, look, this is urgent. I need to bring this to council, and this is worrying this organisation. But we've got all these organisations that you guys belong to. We don't report really anything on those. And actually, wouldn't it be great to be able to support these clubs going forward? I don't know what your organisations have planned, but we as a town council should be supporting that as things move on and making sure that they succeed and continue. We've got, absolutely. But you see where I'm coming from, because clubs have been hit lately, haven't they, as well?
But you can see all the organisations that I belong to.
No, yeah, but we want to make sure, look, you've got a legacy here, and credit where credit's due. You've done a lot of hard work around the 96 drop-ins, stuff like that. And the last thing I'd like to see is them drop off the edge if you were to either disappear yourselves or come off the council. But look, it's making sure things continue, but also support our residents. You've worked hard. You have worked hard, and credit where credit's due. I'm not,
We didn't get any financial support.
No, but
now, thank you very much.
well, you're welcome for that. But it's.
I
think we need to mix this up a bit. It's repetitive otherwise, and it's so laborious. And you sit in there thinking, I've heard the same report, you just move the dots and cross the T's.
Well, that's why this table.
Okay, I'll tell you now, I went to the AGM for the manor. And
Yes,
I asked Tony, no, but I was actually with Tony when I.
Yeah, because you made a
Because I made a mistake
because
and
it
went.
wasn't on Zoom.
And it was
You
on
made a
Zoom.
mistake and went.
Yeah, when we were all
Yeah,
on
no, we
Zoom.
were on Zoom,
Oh, we're
and
on
I
Zoom.
went and Tony said, come and sit with me and do it on. And I asked him then, would you come to a meeting? And he said, no.
That's fine.
He
If
said,
you
no,
don't have
I
to.
wouldn't come. He
So
said,
you-
I like you to come and, I like you to ask me for the, although he's retiring
That's
anyway.
fine.
I'm just saying what he said.
But then you can report for them. If they don't want to come,
Yeah.
then that councillor who's linked to them
It's a
can
good
do a report.
idea to do that. I like that idea, somebody coming, but I did ask him and he said no. He said it's worked very well like
But
this.
there might be
What can I
others, we
say?
can ask them,
Yeah, they
and
might
they
come.
will come.
There's any written reports, questions on any urgent matters, and we invite selected people in person
Give it a bit of
ad
time.
hoc.
And actually make ourselves much more open
Yeah, I agree.
and see, just try it. And if it don't work, we can always bring it back to GMC. But I think we need to make this a bit more interesting.
The only thing I would also add is that I just think it's a sort of category mistake that we have the Fairway Hall report as an outside body, because it's not an outside body, and the running of Fairway Hall is part of the general management of the council, and actually the Fairway Hall report should come to this committee, not full council. It's a bit odd. It's like a
Yeah, it does
major
actually make
company
sense.
reporting on the running of its one of its sort of small branches in detail at a shareholders AGM.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
think it's a good
strange.
idea.
It was you councillors who wanted it to go to.
I know it was, but yeah, I suppose we're allowed to look.
Absolutely.
Change. Yeah,
Let's do that. Let's go to GMC instead.
yeah, it's very good.
Okay.
I like that idea.
Yes, so can we go through exactly what's going to happen then? Outside bodies, the ones that we have already, continue,
Yeah.
that people will table a report,
If one's
as and when, there may be no report.
So maybe come a week before
Yes.
to allow it to go on the
So a
agenda.
week before, we could, I asked them for a report, and we could table it, or they could come and speak.
Or they could, yes, people.
But I would choose 1 or 2, because you don't
don't
want 10
have
people
everybody.
turning up. Just, I know they
Yeah,
might
yeah,
not, but you never know.
There's no.
No,
So-
that's good. We could go through the list and see.
So I'd also look at who else we can expand on. This actually, we as a town council are interested in what you deliver as a service to the community. Let's get involved. Let's see what you're up to. Let's broaden our horizons and say, what are you up to? What can we help you with? Well, there might be someone out there.
That's making me laugh.
Yeah, it's fine, but there's someone out there who might be going, actually, they might be grateful to have us involved, and actually we can speak up for them. Because, you know,
It could be an opportunity to bring in the communities first.
yeah, absolutely.
What's that? I can't remember the name of the other people, Peter Windsor's lot.
In Spiral.
The Spiral.
Others as well, Elstree Stream Heritage.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Well,
don't
with
have any interaction
Elstree
with the
Stream
tennis club.
Heritage, we'd have to specifically
or
say.
3 minutes.
U3A.
3 minutes.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Just do a report.
So how are you going to decide which
First
ones you're going to?
impressions.
Well, we could have a list, couldn't we, Hugh?
We have a road quota.
I have a couple, two or three, we could ask 2 or 3 each one with each council
Yeah,
meeting.
okay.
And who replies,
Okay.
May I make
So
a
sort of
suggestion?
like a practical basis. That's
Yeah,
what
can I
it's
Yeah.
make a suggestion as well? Like, if a councillor comes across an organisation and that councillor approaches them and says, you know, we can voice anything you want to our town council so people know what you're up to, you're a new organisation on the block or you've been around for a while, no one knows of you. We could then say, well, that councillor can approach, make that information aware to the mayor and the leader of the council and yourself, so that then you can decide whether or not that can be
Do
a
this
new
in
outside
conjunction with
body.
the mayor.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think the mayor should have a little bit of power over this, and but then,
So they can ultimately
you know,
decide which ones.
and it makes the mayor, you know, earn their money as well that they've just had.
So, but no more
Well, then you-
verbal reports from members. Then okay, right.
It
Do
just
you mean
occurs-
communities first or first impressions?
sorry?
You meant communities
I meant
first.
communities
Because
first.
it's a vast organisation
I know.
covering Hertfordshire and St Albans
Yeah,
now,
I
so
know.
we just want a
Just a thought.
small report.
Yeah,
with
just one of those
something
that-
like the community transport aspect of that is of really great importance to some of our.
And they run 2 halls, or there are 3 in the area.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think they're important.
Oh, I still say
Well,
they're
well, no,
important.
It also
I'm saying
occurs,
they're big.
yes, it
that
also
there
occurs
are-
to me, of course, we get giving grants from tonight's meeting to 2 organisations which also could come along and talk.
Absolutely, that's another way
Voice
of
of
doing it.
Theatre and the brass band.
And we'll get to know more about what they're doing, what they ask them for.
At the annual parish meeting, you know,
Yeah.
I invite all of the people who've given grants to come and speak,
Sure.
but also all the community. I mean, look, I think in the recent years we've had like 20 or 30 speakers from
Yeah.
various organisations. So again, we've done very well in you know, encouraging people to attend. But the annual parish meetings are a really good place for people
That's the
who have got
place it
grants, who've received grants to come and talk about how they use their money and what they've done. And
But they do, they do.
At the Flower Festival, we have 39 in pre-COVID, 39 organisations take part. One of them, of course, is the library, but, and some of them sort of more statutory, like the library, but nonetheless, there are that many organisations.
So the takeaway from this item for members is, if you are a representative on an outside body and you don't submit a written report a week before the meeting, then it's not going on the
It's not
agenda.
going on the
Right,
agenda.
okay.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't perform miracles.
But you could update, for instance, I mean, you know,
Um,
when we last had our Novices Alden Reservoir, we had our AGM, the very next day, we had an answer to a question that was very important to us about, the whole thing was going to go to the inspectorate, the footpath that we've been trying to get. And so you would be allowed to say, I would think, that that was a very important thing
To
to
report.
tell people, that's only a for
Urgent and timely updates with permission of the mayor.
Absolutely.
The discretion of the mayor.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. That's a good, I think that should make it an interesting meeting, actually.
Change it.
Change it, yeah, absolutely. Like that. International Affairs Subcommittee, to consider referral from full council meeting 24th of November. I will take all what you want to say, but I would like to say first that I think, or we think, there's no purpose at this moment to keep that International Affairs Subcommittee on. The reason, and I'd like to just say, when we went to this and got International Affairs Committee going, this Chinese at that time, we thought that it was going to be good for Borehamwood. It was going to be that because they had a studios there, we wanted it for culture, friendship. We could exchange students with. I've spoken to Danny Hunter, who was going to exchange students with a chaperone, not on their own. And all that was looking really good. And then of course, all of this happened with what was happening with the Chinese regime. So at this moment in time, we feel there's no purpose at this moment to actually keep on this until you want to, like Jeremy and Simon Rubin and I've said about going along and see if we can twin with Israel. We have spoken about that. So that's my take on this international affairs. Yes, Pat?
Well, I feel exactly the same. I think at this moment in time, we've got so many initiatives going on in the town. We actually need to make sure that we give our full attention to these. And at the moment, international affairs, with China, we thought we were doing the right thing.
Definitely.
We decided that quite clearly we couldn't continue with the regime that was so outrageous and so inhuman, yes.
Yeah, inhuman.
In their treatment of people.
We didn't know that at that time.
But at the outset, we were asked by county, the borough, and even the Department of Trade and Industry to do this, because it was, and even Jeremy Corbyn.
And it didn't cost the council.
It didn't cost him, no.
That doesn't
But
make that
anyway,
clear.
we've moved on from that. It hasn't met, and it's silly just to keep leaving it on the agenda.
For another meeting, just for another meeting.
It doesn't serve any purpose.
Richard, you.
No, Jeremy's had his hand
No,
up.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry,
I
I
haven't-
thought-
You go first.
No, no, please, I haven't
Richard, I'm
done
sorry, I thought you had.
it. I didn't.
Jeremy, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Look, I think that we all learn lessons of what's gone on in the past, but of course, the Chinese regime didn't suddenly change its spots overnight, and I sort of trying to be constructive about this. Maybe if there had been an international affairs committee that had been able to explore your risk assessment, research, and get expert advice before the China Sister Town proposal was worked up, it might have been constructed in a different way, or it might not have happened at all. So look, I accept that you don't want to see an international affairs subcommittee that will kind of prolong the sort of agony that everybody went through over the China thing. But do you not accept that maybe there is a role for a committee or a task force that would look at other opportunities like the sort of Israel-Palestine twinning or other areas in Europe or beyond that could be positive for the town, not just to do traditional twinnings, to look at economic relationships, art and culture partnerships, and to try and work up constructive proposals that could then come forward, because that wouldn't cost anything. I think it could bring in people from the community who've got an interest in building those kind of links. And it would show that as a town during these particular times, we're not, because we had one bad experience and had our fingers burnt, we're not going to be inward looking, but actually we're going to try and sort of fly the flag for Elstree and Borehamwood on a global stage. So don't you think that we could sort of have a group that would work constructively to bring forward properly considered proposals that could be for everybody's benefit? Because I think if we'd have had that, and they would have looked at the China proposal first, then it might have been a different story.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing. We did what we did, and that was then. But at the moment, as I've said to you, we're working with time constraints. You say it will cost nothing, but it does cost something, because it costs us time, but it also costs officer time. None of these things can be, and that's what we were challenged on. We were told that, it was costing officer time. I actually feel but we've got so many initiatives going on at the time, now, that this isn't the time.
Let's get those right.
Let's get everything done properly, because otherwise, there's
So
just too
if
many.
for the sake of argument, local people come together as a group and work up a really positive proposal, like, for example, a twinning somewhere in Israel and Palestine, you'd be happy for that to
They could
go
come
on.
to us.
Well, it doesn't necessarily work like that, does it? If the town council wants to be seen as the gateway and to have its imprimatur over these things, they need to be involved from the beginning, because it would be quite open to people if we didn't have a committee looking at these things and dealing with it, that people could then sort of go ahead under their own steam, set up their own thing and sideline the town
It's yet
council.
another committee, and
Well, let's not make it a formal committee. Let's call it a task force or a working group that
it's still the work.
that doesn't necessarily
It's
have to have
populated.
officer support. It could bring proposals to this committee, and officers wouldn't have to get involved until proposals are actually worked up and seem to have some legs behind them.
Why can't you actually think of it as waiting and get some of these things done now, some of the things we're tasked to do, and then look at it again at the end of the year or next year?
Well, I don't
understand why it's so important to
think
you.
they're mutually exclusive. I think that there's an appetite for this kind of thing amongst perhaps a different group of local people than is necessarily the case with some of the other projects. And actually, some of our other projects, I think they're really important and really worthwhile, like the Fairway Hall redevelopment and so on, but they're quite kind of inward facing, aren't they? Whereas this is something that is a completely different dimension. It's outward facing, it's another string in the town council's bow. I don't think it necessarily requires a great deal of officer input at this stage, and I don't understand why you are sort of so dogmatically opposed to this.
Jeremy, I just need to ask you, when I don't remember you saying Israel and Palestine the last time I spoke to you about this. I don't even remember you saying Israel and Palestine. Is this a new thing that is you want?
We have
No,
always,
something
we've
that you
always
want.
said.
No, not we. I was
That
speaking to. Let me
terminology.
speak to Jeremy.
Okay, but
Because
the
that's
Labour
what I was
group actually
thinking.
were against the China Twin Town when there was only 3 of us, and we actually even then at the time said it would be more beneficial actually if we had tried twinning somewhere in Israel, and we said that.
Oh, I don't.
Yes, we did.
I don't recall it.
Well, you can dig out the minutes, and I can dig out the members of the
Anyway, I
public
was
that heard it.
speaking to Richard. I was speaking to Jeremy.
You were speaking to Jeremy,
Please let me
but-
speak to Jeremy. I'm not listening to you, Richard. I think you're very rude, and I want to speak
No,
to
that's for
Jeremy.
the camera. Go on, crack on.
It's
No,
very
it's fine.
good.
No,
It's
that's
fine
fine.
for me.
Carry on.
Tell me.
Carry on.
Tell you what
Explain.
specifically.
Well, you've just come up with this thing that now you about Israel and Palestine. Why do you want to do it right now?
Because I think that there's no time like the present. I think that we're not a small authority. We have significant resources behind us. We're taking on extra staff, and I think that organisations that have internationalism at the core of their agenda tend to benefit from that. It gives you an expanded outlook. It brings in new ways of thinking, and I think that it's something our town really needs right now.
Okay.
And I think there's a significant section of local people that would really welcome it. Again, I'm not talking necessarily about the traditional Twin Town initiative. I'm talking about the kind of thing that you were, like student exchanges, cultural exchanges, and business links, and anything that we can do to help bolster the local economy now has to be a good thing. So I think it would just be a different strand of the town's activities. So I don't see why that's a bad thing. But we can
It's
keep
not
a
a
few
bad
balls
thing,
in the
but
air
it-
at once.
I don't think it's the right moment at this time, but we don't. But Richard, now you're Jeremy and I, so would you like to voice your opinion?
Well, I've kind of voiced my opinion earlier
Well, I
when I
have to
said
hear you.
quite clearly that actually this was something we had suggested ages ago, and we had suggested.
Well, not at the time of the change.
I'm sorry, it
Doesn't-
absolutely
I don't
was. It
know.
absolutely was,
I don't know.
and you can even check over other members of the public as well that even heard us say we weren't for the twinning China. Absolutely not at the time. Look, at the end of the day, I think we need to be, like Jeremy said, be outward looking. We need to be progressive. We need to be moving forward. Well, it doesn't seem that way to me. It seems like we're backtracking and saying we've had enough. We don't like that now. We'll stop that little project. And I think we need to be setting up a, like Jeremy says, it doesn't have to be another committee as such. It could be a group that go and work on this outside of the council. It hasn't got to be like that. And when they've got something substantial, bring it back to that group, so they can actually have a place to say, this is what we found, this is what we discovered, this would be good for Bournemouth for such and such and such, this would be good for Elstree for such and such and such. If not, they'll be knocking on an empty door, won't they? If you know what I mean. So I think I'd support the idea of having a little task group. Absolutely.
Well, I totally disagree. You're talking about something that's working outside the town, a task force, a group. Then it isn't the International Affairs Subcommittee of the council. And I've never been accused of being xenophobic, and I won't be now. But I don't see there's any, at this point in time, we've got too many things to concentrate on that we need to do properly. We need to properly, we can give time to them, we just don't need. If you can just task force outside an international affairs subcommittee, then you can do it as a task force. We don't need an international affairs subcommittee.
Okay, let me put it slightly differently, Sandra. Would you be in favour or against some kind of international liaison initiative between Elstree and Boreham Wood and somewhere appropriate in Israel?
At some time, I said this. At some time.
Would you be prepared to be part of a task force that would work on that?
I
to
would
make
be,
it
yes.
happen?
Yeah, I would.
Or so would I. So why don't you and I have a task force? Let's work up some proposals, bring it back to GMC when they're sort of fully cooked and ready to run.
International Affairs Committee.
Well, I'm suggesting an alternative. I'm suggesting we have a GMC task force that will look at the possibility of relations between Elstree and Boreham Wood in an appropriate place in Israel, and we'll bring a report back here in due course.
Happily second that and happily agree to that.
But it doesn't, what I'm saying it is, if you listen, you sort of shut people down. It doesn't need an officer. That's what I'm saying to you. We
never said that.
We said we don't need to take an officer's time up for this because it's not the way to do it.
But Jeremy never suggested you need an officer for this. He's suggested
But
you
we
two
have
meet.
need an officer, haven't we, in this?
Tony, finish what you're saying.
Clive, you want to say something?
Okay, now, I hope no one can accuse me of not wishing to improve international relations and to have relationships with foreign places, should we call them, just to be general. I paid for my trip to China to try and increase that initiative.
Yeah.
And it's a shame it didn't work out. I think we did achieve some things with it. What I think we should be doing with the International Affairs Committee, since we've actually got an International Affairs Subcommittee, is we should just not meet for the time being until we've got something to meet about. And if you, Sandra and Jeremy, want to meet together and come up with some sort of proposal, which can then be considered at the International Affairs Subcommittee, then we can schedule a meeting of it and we can move forward in that manner.
Absolutely.
Now, it's not that I want to disband it. I think it should still be there and available. And the other aspect is we could put out the word somewhere, write an article maybe in the Town Crier, saying, does anyone have any contacts abroad they would like to try and introduce to the Town Council to try and, increase cooperation on any aspects? We're very happy to support that. And I think that would be the way forward.
I
agree with that.
There are lots of communities within our town. There are Nigerian communities, Romanian, there are
Right.
whole.
So they
Well,
want-
actually, I personally, when I brought it up, I don't think it should have, we just suggested an alternative. Jeremy and I can go away and look at things and bring it back to the GMC. At this moment in time, we don't need the international.
Well, that's what Clive said. He's actually saying just mothball that at the moment.
Okay.
Keep it, yeah, that's what he's saying. Mothball that at the moment. Keep it there. It's still a thing, mothballed, not being used. You guys have the task force. When you've got something substantially, bring it back to the GMC, and that can then go back into relighting the international committee.
If that's so
If,
desired, that's right.
exactly. And I think that's completely
I
reasonable.
second, Clive.
And I'm happy with third that. I think that's absolutely
All
fine.
right, yeah, put in mothballs.
Basically, yes. Yeah, we've got a
They
few
can
covered.
convene when proposals come
Absolutely.
I
forward.
think you are.
Don't know about that.
Okay,
Thank you.
So,
I'll let you guys sort out dates.
in sort of formal terms, I think what's being suggested is that the terms of reference are simply changed, so the frequency of meetings is as required,
Yeah.
rather than
If it's
whatever
not
was
already,
in.
yeah.
And then you guys can sort out that, yeah?
But I'll
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
specifically recall the fact that the proposal for you to come with a proposal about 20 with a, and
GMC.
Israel
Yeah.
comes back to GMC.
Yeah.
yeah.
Before then, rewrite it,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay,
Alderman Reservoir, Madam Chair.
yes, oh yes, I'm sorry. Okay, well, I don't see how we can take this on. We're asked to, I don't think we, why have no other,
No, we're not being asked to take it on, we're
We
asked
are.
to hold a forum.
yes, but I don't feel why would we be doing that? Right, go on.
Well, I would like to say that we're not at any point in time at the moment able to host a public forum because nothing's changed since the 19th of January. The three councillors are still exploring and investigating whether there could be a compulsory purchase order. We don't know whether there could be. We, ACPT Limited, know that it's the public footpath around the perimeter of the reservoir is going to the inspectorate, and that's all being done, and I've got the papers today. We haven't got a date for that hearing, but we will have, and that will be later on in this year. We've also know that Herts County Council are taking the owners of the reservoir, and Herts County Council are still calling them Liberty Leisure because all the documents refer to that, even though they've changed their name to the Jewel of Hertsmere. And so they're being taken to court on April the 2nd. All of these things are going to have an impact on what will happen. So to have a public forum at the moment is not the right time. We've actually got a date. The Elstree and Bromwood Greenbelt Society will be running with the CPRE something on the, I think this is 21st of February, inviting the public to come along to Wanham Hall and to be considering the Hertsmere local plan, the reservoir, and all the implications of that. I don't think we need to have that as a public forum meeting here at the council.
So
Richard?
Yeah, right, so what I'm interested in here is a couple of questions before then I continue. One, do you want to see Alden Reservoir saved as a group?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. So, and two, obviously you want to see the footpath open
Of course.
and that, you know, that whole area
Of
front.
course.
Yeah, so they're my two
That's
questions.
all.
So then that leads on to what I'm going to say, which is, look, at the end of the day, the full council of Hertsmere has the backing of all three main parties over there, which is phenomenal and it's brilliant. It shows actually when crossover parties want to work together, you can really achieve something. And I like that. And I think actually that now means that we as a council need to work with other councils. And I think we are in a very, very strong place as a parish and a town to be able to be a platform to speak and bring people together. We've tried saying this before about holding forums, and I don't want to become this lastminute.com, let's run around like headless chickens trying to plug the gaps as the ship is sinking. I'd rather be ready with buoyancy devices, ready to float and sail on Alden Reservoir and save it. So what I'm suggesting is we actually do hold a group and bring the necessary bodies together. I.e., yes, the three people that spoke at Hartsmere, Jerry, Caroline, and Azaro, and bring them all down to the town council. Get the green belt, get the organisations group there as well, and say we are all working for the same goal. We want to
that's the
save
same people that we've invited in February.
Yeah, fine, but I'm suggesting we do it at the town council. We've got the facilities here, we make people feel comfortable, and then try and find out what's going to happen if we get a compulsory purchase order. How's it going to be funded? Who's going to be involved in that? These are all questions that need to be asked and answered, and I'd rather be firing on all cylinders when that time comes and say we know the answers, we know what we're going to achieve, rather than sit there and go, who do we need to talk to and what's going to happen
Well,
now?
we know
I'm
who we
worried.
need to talk to already.
Well, to me, I'm not getting that vibe, and personally, I think it'd be a much stronger situation if we're working with all these groups and bringing them together and saying, we're here, the town council here, and we can be that platform to, come from. I think it's a strong location. Sorry, Jeremy's put his hand up. I'll let you speak. Sorry.
Look, I endorse what Richard said, which is essentially that we need to be putting our foot forward here and be seen to be a sort of convener of the arena in which these discussions can be had. But Pat, I'm really struggling to understand your position, because you started by saying that because of all these developments, it's the wrong time. You said because of these developments, it's the wrong time, and we shouldn't be holding a public meeting now. And then you said that these other organisations are holding a public meeting in February. So if it's the wrong time for the town council to hold a public forum, why are all these other organisations holding?
Well, it's noted to do with the Hartsmere local plan, our meeting, but what I say still holds, unless you know more than I do about the compulsory purchase order. At the moment, they've asked, as I understand it, Harvey Patterson to get some sort of idea whether that is a possibility.
Well, what's happened is that a group's been formed of councillors and officers. Harvey Patterson will be involved in that as the senior legal officer at the borough. And they'll be looking at a variety of different possible solutions, including, but not restricted to, a compulsory purchase order and a transitional compulsory purchase order. My own personal view is that the borough's unlikely to be able to agree to a compulsory purchase order even if it wants to, because it would be like writing a blank cheque. But I think that a transitional compulsory purchase order in which the borough effectively seized ownership of the reservoir with a very strong, secure prospect of then transitioning the ownership to a community interest company, a coalition of other organisations who had a long-term sustainable funding plan in place, is the most likely kind of end game here in terms of a solution. And I think that as Elstree Boardman Town Council, whilst we obviously don't have the resources to provide that long-term sustainable funding, what we do have is tremendous reach across the local community in terms of businesses, in terms of groups, in terms of the voluntary sector. And actually, we need to demonstrate to that task force at the Borough Council and encourage them that if they do go down the route of something like a transitional CPO, that efforts are already in place to bring together that kind of rainbow coalition of businesses, organisations, and other agencies that might be able to be the eventual recipients. Now, a lot of this sounds like it might be pie in the sky, but actually you have to start somewhere. And I think our job is as a convening authority to actually start to shape something that might begin to look like a body that could own this in the long term. And these things take time, and I don't think we should wait.
Clive?
Question for Jeremy. What happens if a transitional CPO doesn't manage to find any long-term solution?
Well, I think that, this is my own personal view, it's not a Labour group here or anything like that, but I think that the key reason that a CPO would have to be transitional is because I think the borough's auditors would prevent them entering into a CPO unless there was a reasonable prospect of passing the ownership within a defined amount of time to a body that could sustain the reservoir moving forward. I think if that doesn't exist, then you don't have a transitional CPO
No,
because there's no
right.
transition.
So we've no idea if it's even going to be possible.
Exactly, and who would we know that's got that, and nobody's gonna put their name into that, because it's an unknown quantity.
The HCC couldn't, as an authority as big as it is, couldn't sustain a liability for the dam,
This is
which it could be £5 million.
Yeah, but no one's ever looked at constructing a community interest coalition of partners that could make that sum available between them and raise the funds and create a business plan that's financially sustainable. Everybody has always looked at this in the past as well. This council or that council needs to step in and open a blank check. But we know now that's not a solution. We know we need a model that involves probably some kind of public-private partnership. And the only way that's going to happen is by bringing people together.
Yeah, I agree, but who do you think would put something, a blank check in? I mean, there's just.
Well, no, that's what Jeremy's saying. He's not saying we put a blank check in. He's saying,
Who would
look,
agree to that?
look, we are a council in our own right, Hartsfield is a council in its own right. There are all the other things that we can facilitate bringing all these people on one roof and
That's
say,
not a public forum, though.
Yeah,
That's not.
You're inviting, the idea is that you invite people that will have an interest, in sustaining.
But not
absolutely, yeah, no. I don't-
Okay, so maybe we're just arguing about terminology. Maybe we're talking about
Well,
an
no,
open forum.
we need to get something right. We all agree here, we want to save the
Of course.
Absolutely.
And we want to find a way to do that. And we do know that the town council couldn't take on a liability.
No,
No, Pat, right, we're not going to take on an open identity of the town council. But we might say, conceivably, as I'm not saying this is a proposal, right? We might say as a town council that we would try and spend £200,000 of seal money on the reservoir. Okay? And us saying that might unlock the borough to say, well, maybe we'll put £500,000 of seal money into it. That in turn might unlock the county, so they would put, it might unlock some local businesses. But somebody has to put their toe in the water first, be the convener, bring people together.
That's what we're saying. So it's not going to cost us anything by bringing people together.
Yeah, but it doesn't need a public forum. We could even discuss that here and now. Is that a possibility? Would we be allowed to do it? We're going to talk later on.
Well, no, that's what Jeremy just said again a minute ago. He said you're just arguing about the terminology. We could say it's an open forum, just bring these groups together. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not going to cost us anything, and actually it's a
Open forum is the same, Richard.
Well, it's key organisations.
No,
and
it's
groups.
let's invite, for instance, for the sake of argument, we might invite the 30 largest businesses in the town, rather than saying open to everybody. We might
Well, I
invite.
think you've got a target, because then you get results. There might be people who come forward and say, well, I wasn't asked, but I would be able to X, Y, and Z. But we all, we do know that the original idea of a trust was with certain people on that trust body, and that might be something that could work. Now, we know that there is already a CIO in place there. Tim Wakewood has a CIO for the Alderman Renaissance.
Right.
He is interested, but he doesn't have any money.
Well,
But he has already
That's
got a
exactly what we need,
structure
right?
there. So there is a possibility of getting these people to talk with us without involving a great big public forum, and then we can go to the public afterwards when we're looking for funding and whatever. When we set up, it was Clive's idea in the first place, Save Alderman Country Park. It was, and we raised the princely sum of £14,000. And we've spent very little of that over the time.
We've been helping too, we have helped.
Yeah, but you've got different ways of marketing things. And times have moved on and times have changed. But we actually worked then with a vast number of people. Bushy should be involved. Bushy
Absolutely.
Forum, because they are butts there. North London. We were in touch with the
So moving forward, we need business to contact businesses, but we don't need this. We just don't, I don't think we need this. I don't think the town can, I just feel the town can't take this on.
Can't we have a go through, and you said the 30, I mean, I know you plucked that number out of the air, and I'm not going to challenge you on that. There might be 5 businesses in the town, there might be 25. But we could look at who are the key stakeholders and see
But
what we
just
can
think,
do with
I
that.
didn't pluck 30 out the air. My sort of thinking on this is that to make a transitional CPO even, potentially viable, we need to get something like £1 million in the bank. And I can see with a struggle,
You've got
us
a lot of
raising
business.
half of that from various local
You
authorities.
do know what
And I see us trying to raise the other half from local business. And I thought between the 30 largest businesses in the area, we ought to be able to muster £500,000.
But have a look at what the cost, I mean, I can't tell you what it is because it's always been kept a secret. What the public liability of insurance is on something like that. But I do know what work costs of, they have to have a weekly survey, a monthly survey, an annual survey, and a 5-yearly survey of the dam. That costs a heck of a lot of money. And so that's
that's what I'm saying.
there's a lot of costs that are there before you look at the dam and that it might breach. Now, Hertsmere County Council did their 5-yearly look at the dam. I think their last one was 2015, and they know something. That's why they didn't want to take on the liability, and that's what we've got to be aware of. Even though it won't be disclosed to us, I can find out the
They're
figures.
not taking on the liability, the borough's
But you're
taking on the
suggesting-
liability.
The borough can't because they're a planning authority.
I know, but we can't write a blank check and it's, we just
No,
have.
we can't write a blank check, but we can, we can get to a point where multiplicity of groups and authorities write checks that have a figure on them. And there are plenty of people and authorities out there that can put something into this.
Absolutely.
I just have a feeling that we're still waiting on the result of the court case, 2nd of April, was it?
Yeah.
About the fencing and also
There's
the
so much going on.
PIN's inquiry on the footpath. And until we know the results of those, I don't see we can get a lot of momentum going on.
But those are completely irrelevant to the long-term future. I mean, they're important kind of battles to be won, and they play into the bigger environment. But at the end of the day, if those 2 cases are either won or lost, or as a sort of score draw where we win one and we lose one, it's not going to make any difference to the long-term objective, which is we still need to raise about £1 million to have any prospects to save the revenue.
I think I disagree. They are
It's nowhere
important.
near enough. It's
No,
right
but
from
yeah, in order to get to a point where some kind of transitional CPO might be viable, that I think is the first hurdle
I
to
think you're
overcome.
saying people should.
Jeremy,
And once you've got £1
Yeah.
million in the bank, there are things like lottery and heritage fund. There are all sorts of matches you can start to leverage.
I think they are important because if we say we're to not get the footpath around the lake as a DMMO,
Yeah.
and therefore it gets blocked off,
Yeah.
that would make a very big difference to the value of the reservoir. And I think it would be much
Massive.
more difficult.
Massive,
to
Jeremy,
get
honestly. It's
I
a massive thing to,
I think
honestly,
that
if we don't get
those,
that.
I hear what you're saying, but I think in terms of the long-term future, these are details. The objective and what you'll need to do in order to save the reservoir will not change significantly based upon the outcome
Yeah,
of those
Well, we've
cases.
got a court case on the
Will.
2nd of April. Let us at least wait until, that's not far, that's a few weeks' time. And then we can see, because that's challenging the covenants and the lease that's on there. And the person that knows more about all of that is John Cartledge. You can talk to him and.
Yeah, John thinks we should hold this meeting.
Exactly,
Yes,
John was
I know.
one of these people saying we should hold this meeting, I think we should. A meeting is not
No,
gonna cost much, is it?
I think it's the wrong time
I
still.
don't think it's the wrong time, absolutely, I do.
I don't think
I
there's a
think-
problem
I
in
think
holding a
correct
meeting
now.
and working in partnership with
Until
other
we know
authorities.
about whether the CPO
You
transition
need
or
to
not is
let
gonna
these
be.
things happen, and then we know, it's,
But what we're not asking for the world, all we're asking is to hold a meeting, bring these groups together, to get some answers. Hang on,
Public meeting,
but
we're
no,
talking
yeah,
about-
but that's what
Hold
you're,
the back in the background.
you're literally
You can
arguing-
bring people together.
you're arguing, literally arguing over one word, public. Fine, let's take that out. We're just gonna host a group meeting. Is that a better way of wording it?
No, it's not, I'm not
And just,
arguing about one word.
no, but what I'm saying is, look, we're working cross-party here. We've all got the same goal in mind.
Of course.
So what we're saying is just hold a meeting and say we'll be happy to be a forum, a platform to bring everyone under one roof.
Okay, I'm going to propose that we leave this until we hear the results of, if we go around,
And
so,
Elsham Moral Green Belt Society have offered to do the same thing.
But we've got the facility to do it. They don't.
okay, my proposal
They
is,
have one.
Well, I'm sorry. I
But
think
we're
we've
the
got-
council,
we're the
they're
council,
not.
exactly.
Okay, well, they.
it doesn't matter.
So so is that it? You're not gonna.
It should be deferred, yes.
Well,
Is it worth keeping on the agenda for the next meeting?
I would like to have a vote on that. Then I want to record
Yeah,
the
yeah,
vote.
yeah, yeah, well, I want to record.
That's
the
fine. I
vote.
want to record.
Absolutely, I do, honestly, I do.
So
So what's the motion?
That we leave it, we can leave it, I would like to leave it until we find out more clarity of what I was supposed to say about it. More clarity of what's happening
That
with
it should be put on the agenda for a future meeting within 6 months?
Yes,
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's far too long. I suggest that if you're unhappy with the wording of public, we just hold a group meeting of
Okay, but
relevant
I would
bodies.
like to take a vote, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Okay.
agreeing with taking a vote.
Well, I've just done the proposal, seconding me?
yes, I'll second you.
So who's in favour of Sandra's proposal?
Well, I'll go with it because I think that's probably too early for the meeting. But I think there is scope.
But I've done the vote, I've done it.
Yeah, I know.
You know, you either agree or you don't agree.
Okay.
Please show.
Everybody into it, but anyway, second,
No,
again.
into it. You either say, you either do it or you
I'm
don't.
happy to work cross-party in trying to save on the reservoir,
And
so
I
that's
am
where
as
I'm, well, it doesn't feel that way, I'm sorry, but
Okay,
I'm against your recommendation. And I like that call.
So there's 3-2 for you, please, thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Don't for you. Thank you. I could see the guessing going on, that's fine.
Okay. On exclusion to public, no, we haven't got any public.
Just want to,
You've got to turn the
I mean,
camera
like,
off.
just want to exclude the formally.
Oh, yeah, I'm very sorry, yes. Exclusion of the press and public, the chairman to move the following resolution that under the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, small s, 1, 2 in brackets, the press and public be excluded from the meeting whilst draft proposals for premises development and staffing matters are discussed. Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Dan. Switch the machine off. Great.
Yeah, good night.
You see a person watching.
I don't know why this memory.
No,
It's over. Whether it's coming so awkwardly, I don't